guys, welcome again to True Crime Tuesday. I'm bringing you the story of a crime that took place in the US almost 100 years ago, which brought the nation together in a call for vengeance. Who was Nathan Leopold? Who was Richard Loeb? Two young criminals who wanted to murder a child for the thrill of the experience, as they called it, by committing the perfect murder. The two young men were the first ever teen killers in the US. Take a look. It was November 10th, 1923. Nathan Leopold was 19 years old, was bold and irritable that day as he was driving around with his friend and lover, Richard Loeb, 18 at the time, from Chicago to the University of Michigan, to burglarize Loeb's former fraternity, Zeta Beta Tau. They managed to steal nothing more than $80 in cash, a few watches, some penknives, and a typewriter. It was a disappointing and boring experience, and on the journey back to Chicago, Leopold was very irritable and was arguing and was also complaining indignantly that their relationship was too one-sided. He complained that although he always was happy to join Loeb in his escapades, Loeb was distancing himself from him instead of showing him love and loyalty. They needed a bigger thrill to fight this boredom. They had committed several burglaries together and they had set fires on a couple of occasions, but none of their crimes had attracted the public to talk about it. So they wanted to attract public attention and they needed to do something big that would set all of Chicago talking, and also their major crime would catch the eye of the newspapers. And what would that be? Loeb's head was spinning with ideas. He was making his plans and started to talk to Nathan Leopold about this brilliant idea that he had come up with. A sensational crime. He thought they should commit the perfect crime, the perfect murder. Kidnapping and murder of a child would do it. A crime of perfect daring. They were both quite excited and were talking about how they would go about this. If they demanded a ransom from the parents, so much the better, more exciting. However, they were worried that it would be a tough and very challenging task to obtain the ransom without being caught. Let's go back a little. Leopold and Loeb had met in the summer of 1920. Both boys had grown up in Kenwood, an exclusive, opulent, and ritzy Jewish neighborhood on the south side of Chicago. Leopold was a brilliant student and was only 15 when he matriculated at the University of Chicago. He also showed a passion for the study of birds and was known to appreciate the high visibility and the beauty, the aesthetic appeal of birds. He earned distinction as an amateur ornithologist, publishing 2 papers in the Oak, the leading ornithological journal in the United States. Leopold, as I said already, came from a family that was very wealthy and well connected. His father had inherited a shipping company and had made a second fortune in aluminium can and paper box manufacturing. In 1924, the year of the murder, he was studying law at the University of Chicago. Everyone naturally expected that his career would be one of eminence and glory. Richard Loeb, 18, also came from a wealthy family. His father, the vice president of Sears, Roebuck and Company, possessed an estimated fortune of $10 million at the time. The third son in a family of 4 boys, Loeb was also a very intelligent and a very, very gifted student who graduated from University High School at the age of 14 and matriculated later the same year at the University of Chicago. He did not, however, find his life at the University of Chicago very satisfying. He later transferred to University of Michigan, where he did not really focus on studies, but ended up a mediocre, bored, wanton, lazy alcoholic. He was also known to be friendly and genial. Loeb was especially noted for spending his time reading cheap detective novels than doing anything that would help him in his studies. Anyway, he managed to graduate from Michigan, and in 1924, he was taking graduate courses in history back at Chicago University. The two teenagers had rejuvenated their friendship upon Loeb's return to Chicago in the fall of 1923. They seemed to have little in common. Their personalities were very different from each other's. As I said, Loeb was gregarious and outgoing, whereas Leopold was antisocial and aloof. Yet, they soon hit it off well and ended up intimate companions. And the more Leopold learned about Loeb, the stronger his attraction for this handsome young man with an easy, open charm. Take a look. Loeb loved to play a dangerous game as he found it exhilarating. He sought to always bump up the stakes. He would often indulge in bad, destructive behavior, stealing cars, setting fires, and smashing storefront windows. But Leopold's desire for Loeb only kept growing. This admiration boosted Loeb's ego as a master criminal. He loved it. Nathan Leopold was an egotistical maniac. He could talk about himself, self-praise for hours. Leopold also had a tedious obsession with the philosophy of Friedrich Nietzsche. It's important to remember that Nietzsche was a German philosopher who preached the idea of the Superman, or in German, Übermensch. I believe Nietzsche was a sick man who promoted the sick and insane ideas of immoral behavior and ideas of superiority of certain people, and said that they could do anything to those who were considered inferior. I don't have to say any more, do I? Hitler was a staunch follower of Nietzsche. The rise of Hitler and the miseries of World War II can be connected to Nietzsche. Leopold, who was an insufferable self-loving bore, and his obsession with Nietzsche's totally immoral ideas about the mythical Superman, thought he was a Superman himself, who was above the law, beyond any moral code that might constrain the actions of an ordinary man. He was super, not ordinary. Even murder, Leopold thought, was an acceptable act for a Superman like himself. With all that background information in mind, now let's look at the young men's plan to kidnap and kill a child. They spent long hours together that winter discussing the murder and going through its details. They decided upon a ransom of $10,000. As they had realized before, it would be difficult to collect a ransom without being caught. After much debate, the two criminals came up with a plan they thought was brilliant. They would demand that the victim's father would throw the packet of money, $10,000, from the train that traveled south of Chicago along the elevated tracks west of Lake Michigan. The pair would be waiting below in a rented car, pick it up, and make their escape. It was the afternoon of May 21st, 1924. Leopold and Loeb were driving around looking for a possible victim. After 2 hours, they were ready to abandon the kidnapping plan for another day. But as Leopold drove north along Ellis Avenue, Loeb, sitting in the rear passenger seat, suddenly saw his 14-year-old cousin, Bobby Franks, walking south on the opposite side of the road. His own cousin, Loeb's own cousin, Bobby Franks. Remember, Loeb knew that Bobby's father was a wealthy businessman who would be able to pay the ransom. They had found their victim. Leopold pulled alongside Bobby. "Hey, Bob!" Loeb shouted from the rear window. The boy turned slightly to see the fancy Willis night car stop by the curb. Loeb leaned forward into the front passenger seat to open the front door, offering Bob a ride, which Bob refused at first. Loeb unleashed his charm. "Come on in the car. I want to talk to you about the tennis racket I saw you with yesterday. I want to get one for my brother." Bobby had moved closer now and was standing by the side of the car. Loeb looked at him through the open window. Bobby was so close, Loeb could have grabbed him and pulled him inside, but he continued talking, hoping to persuade the boy to climb into the front seat. Loeb had so much confidence in his real, beguiling and persuasive power. The front seat door was open, inviting the boy inside, and Bobby slid himself into the front seat next to Leopold. Loeb gestured toward his companion. "You know Leopold, don't you?" Bobby glanced sideways and shook his head. He did not recognize him. "No." "You don't mind us taking you around the block?" "Certainly not." Bobby turned around in the seat to face Loeb. He smiled at his cousin with his open, innocent grin, enthusiastic to talk about his success in the previous day's tennis game. As they passed 29th Street, Loeb felt on the car seat beside him for the chisel. They had taped up the blade so that the blunt end, the handle, could be used as a club. Bobby looked away from Loeb, and Loeb immediately reached over the seat, grabbed Bobby from behind with his left hand, covering Bobby's mouth while bringing the chisel down hard, smashing into the back of Bobby's skull. Loeb murderously pounded the chisel into the skull again with as much force as possible, but the boy was still conscious. Bobby was facing Loeb now, desperately raising his arms as though to protect himself from the blows. Loeb smashed the chisel down 2 more times into the forehead of the victim. There was still life in Bobby. The 4th massive blow had gashed a large hole in the boy's forehead, causing blood splatter everywhere. There was blood everywhere. Blood splashed onto Leopold's trousers, spilling onto the floor. Bobby was still conscious, and this enraged Loeb, who jammed a rag down the boy's throat, stuffing it down as hard as possible. He tore off a large strip of adhesive tape and taped the mouth shut. Finally, the boy's struggling, his crying, his moaning had stopped. Loeb relaxed his grip. Bobby was finally still, his lifeless body sliding onto the floor. Criminals are often arrogant and they think they can carry out the perfect crime. However, when these 2 murderers disposed of Bobby's body in a culvert at some remote spot several miles south of Chicago, a pair of eyeglasses fell unnoticed from Leopold's jacket onto the muddy ground. They came back to the city and Leopold dropped the ransom letter in a postbox. The following day, a passerby had come across the body and had notified the police. The Franks family identified the body. No more ransom. By tracing Leopold to the eyeglasses, the state's attorney, Robert Crowe, was able to determine that Leopold and Loeb were the leading suspects. A few days after the murder, on May 31st, both men confessed and demonstrated to the state's attorney how they had killed Bobby Franks. Nathan Leopold admitted they had murdered Bobby solely for the thrill of the experience. The defendants' wealth, their intellectual brilliance, and their high connections, and the totally gruesome nature of the killing combined to make the crime one of the most intriguing murders in the history of Cook County. Everyone came together to demand justice for the victim. Both men were jailed in the Stateville prison, and in 1936, 30-year-old Loeb was killed by a fellow prisoner in the shower room. Leopold served 33 years in prison until he won parole in 1958. Though the younger version of Leopold was a misguided freak obsessed with Nietzsche's sick ideologies and thought he was Superman, he was later able to accept the sheer gravity of his inexplicable, shocking, and horrid crime and express his desire to be a humble little person. He had made his peace within himself and realized the gross nature of what he had done. The repentance process had started. It was 29th August 1971. Nathan Leopold died of a heart attack at the age of 66 in Puerto Rico, where he had lived a quiet life, doing heaps of social work and helping those in need, those in poverty, in every way he could. Thank you, guys. That's it from me tonight. Bye-bye. Hey, guys. Check out the group True Crime Stories on Facebook. Link in description. Thank you.